Good morning. It is Thursday, May the 12th, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the daily declaration for spiritual warfare, the Pledge of Allegiance and the Star-Spangled Banner, I have Don't Give Power Away, Property Rights, Homes on Fire, Parenting, Kudos to Hugh Hewitt, No Free Lunch, Collapse of Parenting, and the last half of Chapter 2 from the book Hondo. All that and more when I come back. Thank you. And now the daily declaration for spiritual warfare for May the 12th. You will not dwell in the wilderness. Just as I brought my children of Israel out of the barren wilderness where they wandered for 40 years, so I will not cause you to dwell in a spiritual wilderness any longer. Because you have listened to my words and have honored me with your life, I will not forsake you in the wilderness, but I will lead you on the road and show you light to bring you out into the land I have promised to you. I will sustain you as you leave the wilderness, and you will have lack of nothing. I will turn your wilderness into a pool of living water and cause my water springs to rise up out of your dry land. I will establish my dwellings place with you and will bless you, give you a fruitful harvest, and cause you to multiply greatly. Nehemiah chapter 9, verses 19 through 21, Psalm 107, verses 35 through 38. Prayer declaration. Lord, release your living water in my dry places and create streams in the deserts of my heart. Let your rivers flow into my desert places. I will not dwell in the wilderness, but will be led by you into a fruitful land. My desert shall blossom as a rose and bring forth abundant fruit. Amen. And that was the daily declaration for spiritual warfare for May the 12th. Thank you. Who is the true conservative? He is religious. He is patriotic and uses common sense. He makes judgments, refuses to speculate, speaks clearly and definitively, and is not afraid to say no. He's open-minded and asks why rather than why not. He is consistent, credible, and influential, not ashamed of his existence, unafraid to learn or correct his mistakes. He is a normal American. Thank you, thank you. What are the true conservative political priorities? Number one, a constitutional amendment banning abortion throughout the country. Number two, make nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons obsolete. Number three, the immediate decertification of all public employee unions. Number four, the immediate assignment of criminal and civil liability to all government regulators. Number five, the immediate repeal of the so-called Patriot Act. Number six, the immediate repeal of all dictator laws. Number seven, the reinstatement of writs of outlawry. Number eight, government-sponsored recalls, ballot initiatives, and referendums. Number nine, a flexible minimum wage. Number 10, means-tested health care. And number 11, the immediate and permanent prohibition of investment banking by any office holder. Back in a minute. Thank you, thank you. Left-wing, right-wing vocabulary. The left says, going forward. The right says, from now on. The left says, homeless. The right says, squatter. The left says, migrant. The right says, fugitive. The left says, eliminate. The right says, reduce. Thank you, thank you. So the Republicans and conservatives are the parties of government. Many people think that being a conservative means being a person of small government. There's nothing in the Constitution, by the way, that says what the size of government is supposed to be. Nowhere in the Constitution does it say that. Don't take my word for it. Look and check for yourself. So that's not the issue. But the point is that we are, again, the party, the people of government, because we revere the Constitution of the United States. You can really say that it is the left that does not like government at all. What they like is rule. They like power. They like force. And in some cases lately, they like violence. We are the party of government. Constitutional government is civilized. It gives people the opportunity to express themselves, and they can do so without being victimized. But we are the party of government. And this, again, is going along the lines of what I've said before, which is the Republicans and conservatives need to challenge the left on areas that they haven't challenged them before. Up until now, the left has always been considered the party of government. The Democrats are the party of government, and that the Republicans are the party of big business. Why? Because the left has said so. Again, the left has been setting the political dinner table for decades. They have decided that it's the issues that we should run on. They've decided what those issues are, and they've decided who stands where, depending on what issue. They were the ones that decided that they're the party of government and that the Republicans are the party of big business. And the Republicans just kind of went along with it. And they've gone along with all of this stuff. The left has said we're the party of environmentalism, we are the party of civil rights, we are the party of feminism, et cetera, and the Republicans just kind of shrug their shoulders and go along with the program, and then complain because they can't win. And there's no way to win on any of these issues if you're going to concede that the left owns it, okay, or is the experts concerning a particular issue. If they're the experts concerning, for instance, the environment, then anybody who opposes their pronouncements on climate change, it can be and will be and is dismissed as a nut, as insane. I just saw an article on the internet, a little article. I didn't go into it, but the headline was that Donald Trump has a conspiracy theory about hurricanes that's so extreme, it's insane. And of course, they can get away with that. It sounds like a credible argument. Why? Because all the people on the right concede that the left is the party of the environment. So that makes them the experts. They get to decide what is or is not environmental. They get to decide what's going on with the weather and with the environment, whether or not there's global warming or global cooling or schmooling, wooling, gadooling, whatever they say is going on. Their word rules. Because the Republicans simply concede the point. Well, yeah, the left they're the experts on the climate change, so, well, then if you come out and say anything against climate change, you say it doesn't exist, or you try to come up with another plausible explanation for weather phenomenon such as tornadoes or hurricanes, the left can immediately dismiss you as not worth listening to, whether they dismiss you as a kook or a nut or whatever, but basically they can dismiss you credibly as being not worth listening to. Why can they do that? Because you have given them the power to do that. What I'm saying is, Republicans, conservatives, take back your power. Quit giving power to the left. Quit giving power to the Democrat Party. Quit giving power to Nancy Pelosi. And the way we can start that is by correcting a wrong. We're the party of government. We like government. The left doesn't like government. The left likes power. The left likes rule. Okay, so we redefine the political landscape. We can do the same thing with environmentalism. We are the true environmentalists because we are the ones that are really concerned about the environment because we put it in its proper context. The environment in service to human beings. And human beings come first. So redefine, reclaim your power, and quit giving your power away to the left. Thank you. So I'm listening to John and Ken's show right now, and it's 3:15 Pacific time. Anyways, I'm listening to them, and they have a candidate on who is running for governor. So they're interviewing him, and he's talking about the homeless problem. And so I'm very disappointed because we have no homeless problem initially. We have no homeless problem. What we have is a property rights problem. Everybody wants to look at this issue as being, we have to get these folks off the street, and until then, they just stay where they are. And if they're squatting on your property, well, too bad. No, wrong answer. We have a property rights problem in the state of California. And again, this is a situation where people allow the left to define the issue. And because Republicans allow them to do it, there's no way to win. So you have to redefine the issue, and redefine it correctly, of course. And the issue here is not homelessness, it is property rights. If somebody's squatting on your property, they've got to go. The police have to come out, cite them, and if they refuse to move after they've been cited, then they go to jail. If they fail to show for their appearance in court, they go to jail. That's the way this system has worked, and it's worked great for decades. Okay, you keep people, and that's the way you keep people from the multitudes from assembling under freeways and overpasses and underpasses and whatnot. That's the way you keep them from doing that. And they got to move along. They got to go somewhere else. Everybody's making a move along. And pretty soon what they're going to do, if they're drug addicts or whatever, is they got to start looking for rehabilitation. The idea is called raising the bottom. But anyways, I'm getting off subject here. The point is that John and Ken are disappointing me here. And I've said it before. You've got to, Republicans and people of good faith, goodwill, have to change the dynamics of the debate. You can't win a debate if you're fighting the homeless. There's no way to win there. Okay, so that's why it's not a homeless problem. Part of the reason why it's not a homeless problem, but it is a property rights issue. So first thing that has to happen is you got to get the squatters off the property. You got to get rid of all these squatters, and then as you're in the process of getting the squatters off of people's property, enforcing property rights and property laws, then you can deal with where it is these folks are going to go. They can go to a shelter. If they don't want to go there too damn bad, you just don't come back to the property that you've been cited on or face going to jail. But make no mistake, it's a property rights problem. It's a property rights issue. And I'm really disappointed in John and Ken for continuing to describe this as a homeless problem. Because again, now you can't win. If the left defines the terms, we'll never win. What we'll end up with is more bloated programs. We'll end up with these ridiculous stories about homes that are costing $700,000 per unit because because the left is the expert on homelessness, and they're going to decide what it is that's best for the homeless. So then the same John and Ken are going to whine and complain because taxes and fees and other things are going up because of these bloated programs, and many of them are redundant. We already have a Section 8 program. If you want to have these folks get housed, Section 8. Expand the Section 8 program. We already have programs. We don't need programs on top of programs on top of programs. But again, if we look at this the way the left wants us to look at it, we can't win. We can't win. It's just going to get worse and worse and worse. And I don't understand why John and Ken don't see that. But I don't know. Hopefully they will see the light one of these days. But again, remember, if you want to be a true conservative, understand what the real issue is. That is true conservatives that have to get in and fight the battle over the terms. No, it's not a homeless problem. Yes, it is a property rights problem.
Grab the things that they wanted that were important to them. I mean, those are all the stories that we'll be hearing and following up in the next days.
And we do have reporters heading to the scene. We've got reporters heading to the ground. It's a difficult area to get to because, in part, they've got roads that are going to be blocked off leading in, and the traffic is going to be very heavy. They want the traffic flowing out of there, not into it. So it's a difficult thing, but our reporters do make their way to these scenes, and we expect to have Jessica DeNova there within a matter of minutes to be able to report for us from the ground. As we're looking here, Dallas, we see the flames the water being applied to a home. One of the homes that is on fire right now, but what we're watching unfold here is pretty sad for the folks who live in this neighborhood.
So I wanted to play that clip because I wanted to emphasize the fact of the difference between true homeless people and squatters or trespassers. People that lose their homes, their place to live, due to circumstances beyond their control are homeless. The folks that just lost their homes in that fire in Laguna Niguel, and it was at least 9. I taped this one last night, and it was at least 9 last night, and I don't know how many more today before they finally got it under control. But those folks are homeless. Those are the true homeless people. The people that use their own free will to go and pitch a tent under an overpass are not homeless. They're trespassers, squatters. So and what's interesting also is that the people that are now homeless, they're not going to go and take a tent and go pitch it under a overpass somewhere or go and pitch a tent in a park somewhere. They're still going to have respect for other people's property, private or public. What they'll probably end up doing is getting with the Red Cross, who will put them up at least for the night, probably in a high school gym. And so they will have cots in there, and they will get to sleep on cots for at least a night or two. If FEMA's on the spot, then perhaps some type of temporary housing arrangements are being made, trailers or whatever. The point is, these folks are truly homeless, but yet they act with more responsibility and more dignity than the so-called homeless that are voluntarily parking themselves in tents under overpasses. Thank you. And another role of parents, it just occurred to me, is to teach children what is and is not normal. Thank you. So kudos to Hugh Hewitt. Hugh Hewitt is doing what I've suggested, and that is to go ahead and interview potential candidates for office. He's in Pennsylvania. He's interviewing several of the people in Pennsylvania. I believe it's the governor's race, and good for him. That's what we should be doing. Why complain that conservatives aren't getting enough media time and then shut those same conservatives out by consistently quoting liberals? That's stupid. If you want to see conservatives have more media time, microphone time, give it to them. This is an election year. We have an election coming up in November, and every person on the right, every right-wing talk show host should be giving every extra second they've got to introducing all the Republican candidates to their listeners. And kudos again to Hugh Hewitt for doing exactly that. Thank you. Now, there's no free lunch. Quote, the person who profits from this law will complain bitterly, defending his acquired rights. He will claim that the state is obligated to protect and encourage his particular industry, that his procedure enriches the state because a protected industry is thus able to spend more and to pay higher wages to the poor workingman. Do not listen to this sophistry by vested interests. The acceptance of these arguments will build legal plunder into a whole system. In fact, this has already occurred. The present-day delusion is an attempt to enrich everyone at the expense of everyone else, to make plunder universal under the pretense of organizing it. Frederick Bastiat. I can only say that the prophetic nature of what Bastiat writes here is borderline creepy. That 21st century defenses of cronyism, borrowing from the 19th century pleadings of rent seekers, which Bastiat warned us against over 150 years ago, says much about the immutability of human nature and the gravity of what is at stake here. And that was, there's no free lunch. Thank you. And now the collapse of parenting, how we hurt our children when we teach them or treat them like adults. Chapter 10, the third thing, the meaning of life. When I visit schools, I often meet with students in groups both large and small. When I meet with middle or high school students, I sometimes engage them in semi-Socratic back and forth questioning. I pose questions and call on students who raise their hands. What's the point of school, I ask? Why bother? To get a good college. That's the answer I hear most often from American high school students. So what's the purpose of college, I ask? To get a good job, to earn a living, the students answer. This dialogue is the basis for what I've come to call the middle class script. The script reads as follows. 1, work hard in school so you can get into a good college. 2, get into a good college so you can get a good job. 3, get a good job and you will make a good living and have a good life. There are several problems with this script. The first problem is that every line in it is false. 1, working hard in school is no guarantee of admission to a top college. We all know stories of kids who worked hard, earned good grades, and didn't get into any of their top choices. 2, getting into a good college is no guarantee of a good job. The media and the blogosphere are full of stories of young people who have earned bachelor's degrees from Princeton and Harvard and who are now waiting tables or simply unemployed. 3, getting a good job is no guarantee of having a good life. More about number 3 in a moment. But first, you and I need to ask the question more seriously. What is school for? I find that parents in the United States, more than any other country, have bought into the middle-class script. In Germany and Switzerland, for example, there's no shame if a 15-year-old chooses to train to become an auto mechanic rather than embarking on the university track. And that's true even if both parents are university professors. Mechanics in those countries are respected and they earn good money. Mechanics can earn good money in the United States as well, but there's a stigma, a lack of respect attached to blue-collar work in the United States today, which is utterly lacking in Middle Europa. In the United States, it's hard to imagine the child of two professors choosing to go straight into vocational training to be a mechanic unless that child has been diagnosed with some sort of learning disability. Most Americans today regard vocational training as a low-prestige option for below-average IQ kids or for kids with learning disabilities. At some level, sometimes subconsciously, many Americans, both parents and students, have accepted the idea that a primary purpose of K through 12 schooling, maybe even the primary purpose, is to get accepted into a selective college and to prepare for college. That's a mistake. The primary purpose of education should be to prepare for life, not for more school. And many of the skills needed to succeed in life are different from the skills needed for admission to a top college. In order to be admitted to a highly selective university, it is usually necessary to have a good grade point average as well as good test scores. The student will also need to have participated in extracurricular activities that will impress the admissions staff. So a rational student will avoid classes that might interest her, but in which she is less certain of getting an A. Instead, she enrolls in familiar classes that she knows she can ace. She may sign up for an after-school activity, not primarily because it interests her, but because she thinks it will look good on her college application. In short, she's not living so much as she is performing, putting on a show to impress the college admissions office. And it breaks my heart to see so many parents aiding and abetting this puppet show in the belief that they are acting in their kids' best interest. There are a few life trajectories, but only a few in which this approach might make sense. If you're absolutely certain that you want to be a doctor and you are sure that nothing else will bring you fulfillment, then the middle-class script might be a good fit for you. Work hard in school, get into a selective college. Work hard in college, get into a medical school. Work hard in medical school, get into a good residency. Work hard in residency, get a job with a good practice. Simple. The medical profession is a popular choice among college students, in part because the path it offers to a good life seems clear at 18 years of age. As a practicing physician, I can tell you that many of my colleagues never did the hard work of figuring out, in childhood or adolescence, the answers to the really important questions. Who am I? What do I really want? What would make me happy? Those are not trivial questions. The great American psychologist Dr. Abraham Maslow observed that many adults never answer those questions. I've seen some such adults among my own physician colleagues. This man may be regarded as a successful surgeon. He may earn $600,000 a year, but he's miserable. He's unhappy because he's working 80 hours a week at a job he has come to loathe. If you're working 80 hours a week at a job which shrivels your soul, then you're a slave. I don't care whether you're earning $600,000 a year or more. Life is precious. Each minute is a priceless gift. No amount of money can reclaim lost time. If you're wasting your time on work you detest, and you may come to feel resentful about the time you are losing. If you're a physician, you may come to resent your patients. I've learned to recognize such physicians, and I try to steer my patients away from them. According to some labor force experts in the 21st century, most Americans will bounce from one job to another, even from one career to another, several times throughout their lives. That sort of life, the bouncing from job to job life that most of our children will lead, demands a very different skill from the skill set which works well in school. Your child will have to be willing to try different things to go in different directions in order to find their niche, their calling, their vocation. And their niche, calling, or vocation may change over time. If you and your kid are playing by the middle-class script, then school isn't preparing your child for real life. Instead, school is making your kid less prepared for real life by pushing your kid to be unduly cautious and risk-averse. The rules for success in life are different from the rules for getting admitted to Princeton or Stanford. The willingness to fail is one key to success in real life. To be a top student, you need to get A's all the time, or at least most of the time. The values inculcated at most schools today, both public and private, reinforce a reluctance to take risks, a reluctance to fail. Your job as a parent is not to reinforce the middle-class script, but to undermine it. Empower your daughter or son to take risks and congratulate them not only when they succeed, but also when they fail, because failure builds humility. And the humility born of failure can build growth and wisdom and an openness to new things in a way that success almost never does. Steve Jobs said something similar in his 2005 commencement speech at Stanford. I didn't see it then, but it turned out that getting fired from Apple was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. The heaviness of being successful was replaced by the lightness of being a beginner again, less sure about everything. It freed me to enter one of the most creative periods of my life. Over the past 15 years, I've visited more than 380 schools. I've been trying to understand what kids need and how schools help or don't. I've often been disappointed. Many schools I have visited, especially in the United States, completely embrace the middle-class script. As a result, they often make kids more fragile rather than less. But some schools have slipped free of that script. One of those schools is Shore, the Australian school I mentioned earlier. Robert Grant, 6th headmaster at Shore, was fond of making one particular remark to the parents of students newly enrolled at the school. He liked to say, "I hope your child will be severely disappointed during his time at this school." The parents were often confused. Why would the headmaster wish for my child to be severely disappointed? Grant would explain that if a student does not experience real disappointment at school, then he will be unprepared for disappointment when it comes in real life. And disappointment will come. Dreams will be crushed. Loved ones will die. Relationships will end. The right education alongside the right kind of upbringing should prepare your son or daughter to handle disappointment and failure, to slip loose of a dream when the dream is over, to move on to another field of endeavor with no loss of enthusiasm. A few schools teach this explicitly and well, but in the United States there are only a very few. Some of the American schools regarded as the best because many of their graduates attend highly ranked colleges, don't even attempt to teach these skills, the skills needed for success in life. Those schools are too busy preparing their students to get the best grades and the best test scores. So I wanted to go ahead and read this part of this paragraph again, and then I got to comment on it. And disappointment will come. Dreams will be crushed. Loved ones will die. Relationships will end. The right education alongside the right kind of upbringing should prepare your son or daughter to handle disappointment and failure, to slip loose of a dream when the dream is over, to move to another field of endeavor with no loss of enthusiasm. Now, this is important because today you hear from the left culturally over and over and over again, never give up. Never give up, never give up, never give up. And my counter to that, the true conservative counter to that is you don't have to waste your time. If you've gotten to the point in your life where whatever it is that you're doing, it occurs to you that this is getting you nowhere, then it's okay to say, you know what, I'm done with this, I'm going to do something else. And that's what this paragraph is talking about. Flashdance was a popular motion picture when it premiered in 1983. It's about a teenage girl who dreams of auditioning for a prestigious dance company, but she lacks the training and resources of many of the other girls. She is discouraged. At one point in the movie, she's ready to give up. Then her boyfriend, Nick, tells her, when you give up your dream, you die. So she perseveres, and her dream comes true. Many American parents and kids today are caught up in the grip of what I call the Flashdance illusion. Movie is metaphor. Even if they've never seen Flashdance, American kids have seen dozens of other movies with the same theme. Go for your dreams. If you work hard enough, it will happen. If you build it, they will come. And the parents often are stuck in the same script. But it's a toxic script. It leads kids to focus on one trajectory, one storyline. Initial failure must be met with the resolve to try harder in the same domain, leading to ultimate success. Flashdance might have been more interesting as a movie and more instructive for real life if, halfway through, Jennifer Beals' character had said, maybe I'm not such a great dancer after all. Maybe I'll forget about dancing and instead go to Colorado and try my luck as a ski instructor. Or maybe I'll open a bed and breakfast in Nova Scotia. The Flashdance metaphor is toxic for reasons similar to why the culture of Instagram and Facebook is toxic. It's all about me. It's all about what I'm doing, my success. For many middle-income and affluent American parents, the deepest meaning of life they can offer their children is this notion of personal success. Winning the jackpot of fame and fortune has become the new American dream. Success equals fulfillment, or so many Americans now seem to believe. As New York Times columnist David Brooks recently observed, American culture today is based on the premise that career and economic success can lead to fulfillment, an assumption that our Brooks calls the central illusion of our time. The flip side of the dream is what Mark Schiffman, professor of humanities at Villanova, calls the game of fear. The concern so many young Americans now have that they will not find their place, that they will be less successful than their parents. It has always been hard to answer life's deep and abiding questions, observed Schiffman, but he believes that contemporary American culture makes it hard to ask them at all. He points out that young adults today have become accustomed to relying on institutionalized criteria to validate and affirm themselves. The result is a focus on what kids do, what they achieve, instead of on who they are, their character. That's another good point, their character. For the left, the issue is personality. Okay? Nobody has any character as far as the left is concerned. Okay? And so they judge people based on their personality. Somebody is mean, for instance. But the truth is that it is your character that means far more than your personality. It's part of your job as a parent to help your child develop character, self-control, conscientiousness, to help your child to learn what does and does not matter. Doing so, Professor Schiffman concludes, will give your child clearer bearings amid life's uncertainties, a place to stand outside the game of fear. And I also want to say here, an excellent point here is what he says is, what does and does not matter. Because the left is about what works. You'll hear them on the left say, well, that doesn't work, or that won't work. And that is part of pragmatism, and pragmatism is just a fancy way of saying that the ends justify the means. They don't. Ever. Okay? So when you hear somebody saying to you, well, that doesn't work, you say, but yes, it may not work, but it matters. Nonetheless. That's your response. The antidote to the culture of Flashdance and Facebook is to teach humility and gratitude. It's no longer all about me. It's about service to others, integrity. Even if my service and integrity are never noticed by anybody and never result in any morsel of fame or fortune. It's finally about the person you truly are, not the person you are pretending to be. Real life does not conform to conventions of the movies. American kids and their parents need to break free of this idea of life as some sort of movie about personal success. Let it go. Find another dream. The movie is not a good metaphor. One of the most difficult obligations of responsible parenthood is telling your son or daughter that their dream isn't going to come true, that they need to find another dream. Parents unsure of their own authority, whose top priority is pleasing their child, will never speak those difficult truths. But if you don't, who will? And that's the end of part 1 of chapter 10 of the book, The Collapse of Parenting, when we treat how we fail our children when we treat them like adults. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now we're back to chapter 2, second part of chapter 2, from the book Hondo by Louis L'Amour. And so when we left chapter 2, Hondo and Angie Lowe have become acquainted, along with Angie Lowe's son. and the dog, he has his dog Sam, and so we get to know a little bit about Sam and a little bit about Hondo, and apparently Hondo is a dispatch courier for a general, for a general officer. So he's on his way to dispatch something, and that's what happened when he got ambushed by some Apache. So he goes to this house. He finds Angelo's house, and so he's going to buy one of the horses from her. She gives him some food. He goes ahead and tames one of the horses, and then he goes ahead and shoes the horses, and that kind of thing. Also splits some wood. He kind of earns his keep around there. And so there's the thing going on between Angie and Hondo is that Hondo knows, she keeps talking about her husband. Well, my husband is away, and he's out chasing calves, and he's doing this, that, and the other thing. Hondo has looked around the place and realized nothing's been going on here for a long time. No man has been here at this ranch for a long time. The horses need to be shoed. The axe is all worn down, and also the way the roof is, there's a hole near the foundation of the barn, and there's just everything about the place says there's not been a man here tending to the things that needed to be tended to. So he knows she's lying, and so he's coming up, he's going to confront her about that. So this is chapter 2 of the book Hondo, a second part of chapter 2. She drew her hands down over her apron. I better go look after Johnny. Mrs. Lowe, his tone stopped her as she turned away, and half frightened, she looked around at him. He was turning a shoe in the forge, not looking at her. She noted the breadth of his shoulders and the narrow hips. He must be awfully strong. You're a liar, he said. His voice was so calm, so matter-of-fact, that it was impossible to take offense. An almighty poor liar, he added. I don't understand, she faced him, drawing herself up a little, a picture of dignity and reserve. There was, he thought, a good deal of queenliness about her at such moments. She had breeding, that was obvious. Not even this ranch and the simple clothing could deprive her of that. It was like seeing a thoroughbred horse in his winter coat. The bloodlines were there, despite season or situation. He nodded toward the horses in the corral. Those horses haven't been shod in months. Your axe hasn't had an edge on it for just as long, and no man has been using it. The 5-pound tea can in your house is empty. Your husband's been gone a long time. Angelo's face was pale. Now see here, Mr. Lane, I don't think you have any right to, not talking about rights. I'm talking about lies. Why do you lie to me, Mrs. Lowe? You were scared that you wouldn't be safe with me here and your husband away. That it? That's part of it. Hondo took the shoe to the anvil and hammered it out. Sparks flew and the ring of the hammer precluded any conversation. Women always think every man that comes along wants them. She turned swiftly, chin high, and walked toward the cabin. Her heart was pounding, and she had difficulty breathing. Besides, she heard him say, I looked around when I first came. Nobody's been out here a horseback since the rain. Maybe not for a long time before. When he finished shoeing his own horse, he turned it back into the corral and let out the plow horses. It was growing late, but he trimmed down their hooves and went to work with the shoeing. He stopped when he had finished with the first of the big horses and rolled a smoke. He stepped away from the stable and inspected the rim of the valley again. This was a nice little place. The right man could do a lot with it. Of course, it was no place for a woman to be alone, and no right kind of woman would ever leave such a woman, no right kind of man would ever leave such a woman alone in this country, unless he was dead. He read more into the place than she would have believed. There had been a lot of work done here, good solid work that a man could be proud of, and it had been done by a man with pride in the work. But that had been a long time ago. Since then, the place had been slowly running into the ground, and here and there were the fixings of a man who was shiftless, a rawhider, if you ever saw one. Her father must have built the cabin. It was carefully done by a man who knew his business. It was built of stone, and the stones were fitted carefully. It was logically located both for use and for defense and for shelter from Northers. A good man with a rifle could stand off almost any attack from this place, situated as it was. And the corrals had been well built. They needed work now. The whole place needed work. The roof of the shed needed thatching. The water holes should be cleaned out too. And once there had been a small dam to catch water and a pool to irrigate a small kitchen garden. The dam had been washed out by some cloudburst and never repaired. A man could look around and draw his own conclusions. Her father had died, and her husband, whoever he was, had let the place run down. She had been trying to keep it up, but it was a man's job, and she had her woman's work and that child. He was a well-behaved child, and you could always tell what the parents were by the child. She was a woman, all right, scarcely more than a girl in years, but all woman, and mighty pretty. He took the cigarette from his lips and looked at it, took one more drag and dropped it to the earth, where he automatically rubbed it out with his toe. He'd best get on with his shoeing. It was growing late. It was sundown, and in this cup it would grow dark sooner than it would up there on the level country, if you could call it level. He heard the door close and saw her coming, carrying a water pail. He did not turn or speak as she walked behind him, but heard her footsteps hesitate a little as if she thought to speak, then went on. Returning, she stopped and shifted her pail to the other hand. "Mr. Lane?" "Yes, ma'am." "You're right. I was lying. My husband is overdue. In fact, he should have been home long ago." Hondo nodded. "Figure Apaches killed him?" She stiffened, shocked at the acceptance of the idea that had occurred to her many times. Of course not. There are 100 possible explanations. She knew of several that she never allowed herself to consider. She had known Ed Lowe enough to understand him. Indians are one of them. But we're at peace with the Apaches, except for a few renegades who, Mrs. Lowe, Hondo straightened from his job. If you've got good sense, you'll pack up, you and that child, and come out with me. There's a lot of trouble cooking in the Apache lodges. The main chief, Vituro, is called to council. A full report of it is in the dispatches I'm carrying. "Oh, no," she shook her head with decision. "We've always got along splendidly with the Apaches. They drink and water the horses at our spring. I haven't seen the great Vituro, but there have been plenty of Apaches here." "I've seen Vituro." Hondo's tone was grim. Before the treaty, he had 40 scalps hung in his horse's mane. But that was before the treaty. "We broke that treaty," Hondo persisted patiently. "There's no word in the Apache language for lie, and they've been lied to. If they rise, there won't be a live white in the territory." Angie was not convinced. "They wouldn't bother me. Us, I mean. We've always got along well." Hondo returned to his work. There was little to do now, and he was tired. The hammer drove home the nail straight and sure. She watched him, noting the way the horses trusted him. Even that wild Mustang he had broken had seemed to trust him. And there was Sam, that curious dog. She looked at Hondo's face, wondering what was behind it. What was he thinking? What above all did he think of her? Woman-like, she wanted to know. What kind of man was he? What had his home been like? What sort of a woman would he want? A queer little shock of something, almost like fear, went through her. Suppose he was married? Well, then, suppose he was. It was no business of hers. What could it possibly matter? Nevertheless, the thought disturbed her, and she looked at him keenly, trying to find the marks of a woman on him. But she could find none. But you could not tell with this sort. A woman made her impression, but it was inside of the man. A woman could change a weak man, but not such a man as this. Yet to be loved by him would be... People I know, Hondo commented on her last remark, man and wife got along real well for 20 years. Then she blew a hole in him in a stagecoach could drive through. She got mad. The Apaches are mad. I have nothing to worry about, I'm sure. Nice to be sure. Sam trotted up as they were talking. The big dog had been away on some business of his own. From the tuft of fur at the corner of his jaw, the business had concerned rabbits. He seated himself several yards away and watched Hondo. Both were somehow remote, untouchable, unreachable. She studied the dog as if hoping to learn more of the man. "That's a strange dog you have." "I don't have him." She was puzzled. "But the two of you are together." "He stays with me. He can smell an Indian at a half a mile." He returned the last of the horses to the corral and racked up the old shoes on the corral fence. He looked at Angie as he spoke, and fighting the desire to look away, she met his eyes. "He smells Indians?" "I don't believe it." "Lots of dogs smell Indians. You can teach them." "Teach them? How?" He leaned on the rail, shoving his hat back from his brow. The hair curled damply against his forehead. She repressed an urge to reach up and brush it back. The sun was down, but it was still light, and the air was turning cool with the desert night. Long streaks of red remained in the sky, and on the western edge of a cloud there was a blush of old rose. Pale yellow light lingered on the topmost leaves of the cottonwoods, and their leaves whispered in the dry way that they have. Shadows gathered beneath the trees and beneath the western shoulder of the mountains, reaching out in long fingers toward the cabin and toward the man and woman who stood by the corral, talking. You get a puppy and hire a tame Indian, then cut a willow switch, and 4 or 5 times a day you have the Indian beat the puppy with the switch. And all the rest of his life he'll signal when he smells an Indian. "Beat a puppy?" She was shocked. "How cruel." He shrugged. "That's the way you do it." "And anyway," she scoffed, "I don't believe a dog can smell Indians. I mean, as different from anyone else, you or me, for instance." He gathered the tools and returned them to the bench beneath the lean-to. "They can, Mrs. Lowe, matter of fact. Indians can smell white people." "I don't believe that." He smiled, and the smile lightened his features with a whimsical, almost boyish expression. "It's true, ma'am. I'm part Indian, and I can smell you if I'm downwind of you." She was uneasy, but to cover it she laughed and then shook her head. "Why, that's impossible." "No, Mrs. Lowe, it's not impossible." He stepped around so that he was facing her and downwind of her. She felt a strange tenseness come over her and fought it with sudden desperation. He stood close, his nostrils widening, narrowing. For a moment she thought he was going to. "You baked this morning." His voice was matter of fact. "I can smell fresh bread on you. Sometime today you cooked salt pork. I can smell that on you. And I can smell soap all over you. You took a bath. On top of that, you smell all over like a woman. A woman's got a different smell from a man. Not salty and sharp, but kind of soft and rich and warm. I could find you in the dark, Mrs. Lowe, and I'm only part Indian." He was standing close to her, and they were both aware of a sudden tension. She started to speak, but would not trust her voice. There was something about him. It was impossible. It was ridiculous. But there it was. She drew back a little. She smoothed her apron. I think I'll go back to the cabin," she said hastily. She turned swiftly, fighting down an overwhelming urge to run, to escape to familiar surroundings of her own house, to get away somewhere, anywhere, away from him, away from this feeling. It was wrong. It was all wrong. She could not feel like this about any man. She told herself it was wicked, but deep within her, she did not believe it. And what sort of man was he? What did she know about him? What could she know? He had said nothing of himself, just nothing at all. There was something big and hard and sure about him, something in the way he moved or something from inside of him. She had the feeling that there was nothing anywhere that could frighten or disturb him, that he was a man who knew himself, knew his strength and knew his weakness, who had measured himself against the hard land of his living, against the men of that land, and against his wilderness. Whatever he had discovered, he was no longer afraid. It was dark now, and the wind stirred among the leaves and moaned softly around the roof. She knew that sound. It was a lonely sound, a sound that always frightened her because it made her know her aloneness. But not tonight. Tonight, even the wind had a comforting sound. And why was that? She avoided the thought, turning swiftly to work, busying herself with preparations for supper, trying not to think of that big, easy-moving man out there in the gathering dusk. She had known other men. There had been many visitors to the ranch while her father was alive, and some of them had courted her, yet none of them had ever disturbed her as she was now disturbed. He was moving around out there. She could hear the murmur of his voice talking to the horses. She heard the twang of a pitchfork prong striking some object. He was feeding the horses. Soon he would be through. Her throat felt tight. Soon he would be coming to the house. She heard his footsteps on the hard-baked earth. He was coming now. He was coming to the house. She looked blankly around, biting her lower lip as if she'd forgotten something. He was coming to the house, and it was night. It was dark. And that was the end of Chapter 2 of the book Hondo by Louis L'Amour. Thank you. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all of the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers, and reminding you to listen to the John and Ken Show on KFI AM 640, Monday through Friday from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. Pacific Time. Also, KFI needs to bring back Brian Suits and his show, The Dark Secret Place. # bring back Brian Suits. Until next time, be honest, be smart, be beautiful, and remember that the left has no authority, no power, and they can't win.